Sarah's heart stopped beating for a second when she opened the door there. He was standing on her porch all wet from the rain and looking even more handsome. And she remembered, it was Marcus, the guy she'd tried so hard to forget for 3 whole years. She bit her lip, that old nervous habit she thought she'd gotten over, and felt that funny flutter in her chest again, the one that used to make her believe in fairy tales. But it was also the flutter that had wrecked everything she thought. She wanted "Hello, Sarah," he said softly, his voice a little rough, just like she remembered from their quiet talks in college coffee shops. "I know I shouldn't be here, but you're right," she interrupted, holding the doorframe so tight her knuckles went white. "You shouldn't." But even as she said it, she knew she wasn't going to shut the door. She couldn't not when he was looking at her like that, like she was still the girl who used to take his hoodies and leave sticky notes in his books, not when her wedding ring suddenly felt super heavy, heavier than it had in months. "Please," Marcus said, stepping a little closer. "Just 5 minutes, that's all." In asking, Sarah looked back over her shoulder to the living room where she could hear her husband David's conference call coming softly from his home office. Those calls had been happening more and more, seeming way more important than the talks they used to have over dinner. When was the last time David had looked at her the way Marcus was looking at her now? She moved aside. 5 minutes, she whispered. Marcus walked into her home. Their home, she reminded herself, and Sarah watched as he looked around at the life she'd built, the family photos on the mantle, the throw pillows she'd picked out carefully, the wedding picture that cost more than her first car. Everything was perfect, everything in its place, everything she thought she wanted. When she said yes to David's proposal in that fancy restaurant 3 years ago, "You look beautiful," Marcus said, and Sarah's breath got stuck. When was the last time David had noticed how she looked? When was the last time anyone had really seen her? "Why are you here?" she asked, crossing her arms to make a wall between them, but that just made him notice she was wearing the soft lavender sweater he always said made her eyes pop. "I got a job here," he said, running his hand through his dark hair, a move that took her right back in time at Morrison and Associates. "I start Monday." Sarah's heart dropped. Morrison and Associates was just 3 blocks from her office, 3 blocks from her morning coffee spot, 3 blocks from the life she'd made to keep him out of. "So you thought you'd just stop by and let me know you're back in town?" Her voice came out sharper than she meant, but she needed the anger. Anger felt safer than the other feelings swirling in her chest. "I thought about calling," Marcus admitted, "picked up my phone 100 times, but I needed to see you in person. I needed to know." "What if you're happy?" The question hung there like a dare. Sarah opened her mouth to say the answer she'd practiced for 3 years, of course. She was happy. She was married to a successful man, had a beautiful home, everything she'd ever dreamed of, but the words wouldn't come out because happiness wasn't the right word for what she felt. Content, maybe settled, safe, but not happy. Not like when she was 22 and thought love could fix anything. "Married," she said instead. "That's not what I asked." The silence grew, filled with rain hitting the windows, and David's voice from the office, talking about quarterly projections and market penetration, words from a world that felt more and more strange to her, even though she lived in it every day. "You can't just show up here," she said at last. "You can't walk back into my life and ask questions like that." "Why not?" "Because I made my choice." The words tasted bitter. "We made our choice." "No," Marcus said, stepping closer. "You made a choice for both of us. Remember, you're the one who said we were too young, too impractical. You're the one who said love wasn't enough." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering that awful day in the campus library when she'd given back his ring, the simple silver one he'd saved months to buy. She could still see the hurt in his eyes, hear his voice break when he asked why. "I was being practical," she said, opening her eyes to find him even closer, close enough to smell his cologne, different from the cheap stuff in college, but still so him. "David offered me security, stability, a future, and love." Marcus asked softly, Did he offer you love? Sarah's throat got tight. David had offered love in his own way, flowers on Valentine's Day, fancy dinners on anniversaries, a beautiful ring, a perfect wedding. That looked great in photos, but it was love that felt more like a duty than a fire. More like a comfy setup than a big adventure. Not everyone can be a dreamer, Marcus. She said some of us have to be adults. Is that what you call this? He waved around. The spotless living room, being an adult. This is my life. This is your prison. Words hit her hard. Sarah stepped back, shaking her head. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what makes me happy, or what I need. I know you still bite your lip when you're nervous. Marcus cut in. I know you tuck your hair behind your left ear when you're thinking. I know you have that little scar on your hand from when we tried making pancakes in my dorm, and you grabbed the hot pan. Sarah looked down at her hand at the tiny white mark she'd forgotten anyone else noticed. I know you, Sarah. He went on, his voice soft but firm, and I know this isn't what you dreamed of when we used to talk about the future. Those were children's dreams, she said. But her voice wasn't strong, were they? Before Sarah could answer, David's office door opened, making them both freeze. Heavy footsteps headed to the kitchen. Then the coffee machine started. Sarah, David called. Do we have any of those energy bars left? Sarah's eyes met Marcus's, panic rushing through her. Just a minute, she called back, her voice higher than usual. Go. She whispered to Marcus, you have to go. But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he pulled a small paper from his jacket pocket. My number, he said, pressing it into her hand. When you're ready to stop pretending, call me. I won't, she said, but her fingers closed around it. You will, he said with a sad smile, because you know as well as I do that this isn't over. It never was. David's footsteps got closer. Marcus went to the door but stopped with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, he said without turning. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. And then he was gone, leaving Sarah in her perfect living room with her heart pounding and the paper burning in her hand. Was someone at the door? David asked, coming in with his coffee mug, already looking at emails on his phone. Just a salesman, Sarah said. David nodded without really listening, not looking up. Make sure you lock the door. You can never be too careful these days. Sarah watched her husband of 3 years walk away, lost in whatever work thing needed him right now, and felt something break open inside her chest. When was the last time Head looked at her without his phone? When was the last time Head asked about her day and really listened? She looked down at the paper and unfolded it carefully below. Marcus's number, had written coffee tomorrow, same place we used to go. I'll wait until noon. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay next to David, hearing his steady breathing, staring at the ceiling, trying to tell herself she wouldn't go. She was a married woman with responsibilities and promises. She had made her choice and had to stick with it. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus on her porch, rain in his hair and hope in his eyes. She remembered how he used to look at her like she was the most interesting person ever. How he listened to her dreams like they were real. Plans, not impossible wishes. When was the last time David had asked about her dreams? At 6 o'clock in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. The house felt different, like Marcus being there had changed something big. She started seeing everything in a new way. The expensive art. David picked the furniture from catalogs instead of fun finds. The life that looked perfect outside but felt empty inside. Eeyore up early, David said, coming into the kitchen already in his navy suit. Scrolling his phone, couldn't sleep. Sarah said, pouring coffee into his travel mug without him asking. It was their usual thing, so automatic she hardly thought about it. David took the coffee, kissed her cheek without really paying attention. His mind on some urgent email. It'll be late tonight, big presentation tomorrow. Of course you will, Sarah murmured. What, nothing, have a good day. David was already out the door, phone to his ear, talking about market analytics and consumer behavior. Sarah watched him go and felt that empty feeling in her chest again, like she was just filling spaces between his important stuff. She looked at the clock, 7:15. The coffee shop where she used to meet Marcus didn't open until 8. and she had told herself 100 times. She wouldn't go, but standing in her perfect kitchen, in her perfect house, next to her perfectly okay husband's perfectly cold coffee cup, she realized perfection might be the most overrated thing ever. At 11:45, Sarah stood outside Café Luna, the little coffee shop near campus where she and Marcus used to hang out for hours talking about anything. It looked just the same. Mismatched chairs, local art on walls, the smell of fresh bread and coffee that took her back to easier times with one sniff. Her hand shook as she pushed open the door. Marcus was at their old table in the corner, by the window where morning light used to shine on his books. While she watched him study for architecture tests, he looked up when she came in, and his smile was so full of joy and relief that Sarah felt her walls starting to fall. "You came," he said, standing as she got close. "I shouldn't have, but you did." Sarah sat across from him, super aware of her wedding ring and how she'd changed clothes 3 times. Before coming, she'd picked a simple blue dress, one Marcus had never seen, but it felt right. "I ordered your usual," he said, pointing to the chai latte in front of her. "Unless you've changed that too." The teasing in his voice was so familiar it hurt her. "Chess, some things don't change," she said softly. "No," he agreed, looking right into her eyes. "They don't." They sat quiet for a bit, both feeling the weight of all the unsaid stuff. Sarah held her mug, glad for something to do with her nervous hands. "Tell me about your life," she said finally. "What have you been doing for the past 3 years? Marcus leaned back, and Sarah noticed he looked older, more steady, but still had that spark of curiosity and passion that first pulled her to him. "I've been in Portland," he said, "working for a firm that designs eco-friendly buildings and green spaces. It's exactly what I dreamed of doing when we talked about changing the world." Sarah felt a sting, maybe envy. "That sounds amazing." "It is. I love it. I wake up excited every morning about the projects and the difference we're making." He paused, looking at her face. "What about you? Are you still writing?" Question hit hard. Sarah had studied creative writing in college, dreamed of novels that would touch hearts and change views. She had notebooks full of ideas and half-done stories. "No," she said, the words tasting bad. "Corporate communications for a financial firm. That's not what I asked." Sarah looked at her hands. "No, I'm not still writing." "Why not?" Because she tried to explain, without showing how lost she felt. "Because dreams don't pay the bills, Marcus. They don't give health insurance or savings for the future or money for kids. Some days that..." "What David told you?" Sarah looked up sharp. "David didn't tell me anything. I decided for myself to be practical." The Sarah I knew was never practical. The Sarah you knew was 22 and believed in fairy tales. "And what's wrong with that?" The question sat heavy between them. Sarah studied Marcus's face, looking for changes, for signs had gotten practical too, but his eyes still had that spark that made her believe anything was possible. "You can't live your whole life chasing dreams," she said, but the words felt empty. "Why not? What's the alternative? Living someone else's dreams, living no dreams at all." Sarah thought about her daily routine: wake up, coffee, drive to work, 8 hours writing marketing stuff about financial things she didn't get, the people she'd never meet, drive home, dinner with David if he wasn't late, TV, sleep, repeat. When had her life gotten so small? "I'm married," she said again, like saying it enough would make it stronger. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "Really, truly happy." Sarah started to give the same fake answer as before, but got caught in his eyes. The truth was she couldn't remember feeling truly happy, the kind that bubbles up and makes you dance in the kitchen. Content, yes. Secure, sure. But not that it's not about happiness, she said at last. It's about responsibility, commitment, building a life. Whose life are you building, Sarah? Yours. Or his words slapped her. Sarah pushed back from the table, needing space. "This was a mistake," she said, standing. "I shouldn't have come. I shouldn't be talking to you about my marriage or my life or..." "Sarah, wait." Marcus stood, too, reaching for her hand. When their skin touched, electricity shot up her arm. She pulled away like it burned. "Don't," she whispered, "please don't make this harder." "I'm not trying to make it hard," Marcus said gently. "I'm trying to help you remember who you used to be, who you could be again. I'm not that person anymore, aren't you?" Sarah looked around the coffee shop at young couples holding hands. Students working on passionate papers, artists and dreamers who still thought the world was full of chances. She felt like a ghost from her old life. "I have to go," she said. But as she turned, Marcus called her name, Sarah. She stopped but didn't turn. "If you ever want to remember what it feels like to be alive again," he said softly, "you know where to find me." Sarah drove home in a daze, Marcus's words echoing, "If you ever want to remember what it feels like to be alive again." When had she stopped feeling alive? When had her life become something she just got through instead of enjoyed? She thought about who she'd been in college, full of dreams, ready to take on the world, with talent and guts. She'd been sure her stories mattered, that she had something big to say. What happened to that girl? David was home when she got there, unusual for a weekday afternoon. She found him in the living room, still in his suit with his tie loose, staring at his laptop, looking frustrated. "You're home early," she said. "Meeting got cancelled," he said without looking up. "Sarah, have you seen my charger?" She pointed to the side table, where it always was. David grabbed it without saying thanks. Already back in his work crisis, Sarah stood in the doorway, really watching her husband for the first time in months. When had he stopped seeing her as more than someone who knew where his stuff was? When had she stopped wanting more David? She said, "When was the last time we talked, really talk all the time?" He said, eyes on his screen, "About what? Your work, the weather. When was the last time you asked about my dreams?" That made him look up, confused, like she'd asked something in another language. "Your dreams, Sarah, we're adults. We have a mortgage, careers, responsibilities. Dreams are for college kids." The words hit her like a punch. Sarah felt something deep inside crack open, not her heart, but the part of her that had been quietly choking under all the practical stuff and settling for a K-write. She said quietly, "Of course." David was back to his laptop, forgetting her big moment for reports and analysis. Sarah went upstairs to their bedroom, closing the door, softly, a click that felt like the end of something. She sat on the neat bed in the nice room and tried to remember the last time she'd written something not for work, the last time she'd felt passionate, the last time she'd felt like herself, not just playing the role of Sarah, good wife and office worker. In a whim, she opened her bedside drawer and pulled out an old notebook she'd hidden away when she chose to be practical. The pages were yellow, full of story bits, poems, dreams she'd been too scared to chase. She flipped through, reading her younger self's words, and tears came, not just for unfinished stories, but for the person she'd never let herself become. 3 days passed before Sarah saw Marcus again. She'd buried herself in work, staying late, taking extra tasks, anything to keep her mind off dangerous thoughts, but he was everywhere. In the coffee shop by her building, in her computer, reflection, in dreams that woke her up with a racing heart and body, memories she'd tried to forget. On Thursday evening, she was walking to her car in the parking garage when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, her heart already knowing, "This has to stop," she said before Marcus could talk. "What has to stop? You following me, showing up, making me think about things I can't." Marcus stepped closer, and Sarah backed against her car, stuck between cold metal and his warm body. "I'm not following you," he said gently. "I work 3 blocks away. Remember, sometimes paths cross without plans. We need to make sure our paths stop crossing, do we?" Sarah looked up at him, the face that haunted her dreams for 3 years, and felt her strength waver in the dim garage light, with city sounds far away. It felt like they were the only 2 people around. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "What isn't you showing up, making me remember, making me feel? What do you feel?" Sarah's question was soft but strong. What did she feel? Alive for the first time in years, confused, scared, guilty, but under it all, something she'd almost forgotten, hope. "Like, I've been drowning for years," she said honestly, "and I didn't even know until you threw me a lifeline." Marcus touched her face, gently wiping a tear she didn't know was there. "Then stop Drowning, he said simply. It's not that easy, isn't it? Before Sarah could answer, Marcus leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, gentle, full of 3 years of missing each other, and Sarah felt herself melt into it, even though her brain screamed to stop. For a moment, she remembered what it was like to be kissed by someone who saw her as special, worth everything. Then reality hit, and she pushed him away. I can't. She gasped, I can't do this. Sarah knows. She fumbled for her car door, hands shaking badly. Getting the key in this has to end, whatever this is. It has to end now. Does it? Sarah got in, rolled down the window just enough to look at him. I'm married. Marcus, that has to mean something, does it? He asked again, and the question followed her all the way home that night. Sarah lay in bed next to her sleeping husband, staring at the ceiling. Until morning, David slept deep, like someone with no worries who'd never thought about the path not taken. Sarah envied that sureness she'd once been so sure. She'd chosen right, that safety was better than passion. But Marcus coming back had broken that sureness, making her question everything about herself and her life. 5 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs for coffee, but instead of her routine, she pulled out her old notebook again. She sat at the table with coffee and memories, reading the stories she'd started but never finished. There was one about a woman who gave up dreams for a safe marriage, realizing too late she'd lost herself. Another about lovers split by time, finding each other when it was too late to get back what was gone. Had she always known this day would come? Had some part of her been ready for choosing between her built life and her dreamed one? You're up early again. Sarah looked up to see David in the doorway. She didn't sleep, she said, closing the notebook. David poured coffee, kissed her cheek absently, like every morning for 3 years. But today Sarah really looked at him. Searching for a sign, he saw her as more than routine. David, she said, as he headed out. Yeah. Do you love me? He stopped at the door, confused. What kind of question is that? Of course. I love you. We're married. That's not what I asked. David set down his coffee and came back, but she saw the hurry in his eyes, calculating time lost. Sarah, you're my wife. I chose you. I married you. I come home to you every night. What more do you need? I need to know you see me, she said softly. Really see me, not just as your wife who makes coffee or keeps the house. I need you to see Sarah, the person under all that. David stared a long moment, and Sarah held her breath, hoping for understanding or even curiosity. I don't get what you want from me, he said finally. Have a good life or successful, beautiful home, building a secure future. Isn't that enough? The question broke her heart, not because it was mean, but because he really didn't understand. To him, love was a deal, sharing stuff, and duties, the idea, could be wild and life-changing, was like a foreign language. Eyes. She said quietly, it should be enough. David nodded, thinking it was over, and went to the door. It'll be late tonight, don't wait up. After he left, Sarah sat in her perfect kitchen with perfect coffee and her not perfect heart, realizing she had a choice. She could keep this half-life of okay and safe, or jump into the unknown to find her old self. She picked up her phone and found Marcus's number. Her finger hovered over call, shaking with what one press could start. Then she pressed it. Sarah. Marcus answered right away, like he'd been waiting. Meet me tonight, she said before she could check him out. 7 o'clock, the place where we had our first date. Sarah, don't say anything else, just be there, please. She hung up before he could reply, before she could change her mind, before she could talk herself out of the scariest, most needed thing ever. Tonight she was going to remember what it felt like to be alive, and tomorrow she would deal with the consequences.